Hi everyone, my name is Ioan Bucuraș. I'm a governmental and corporate public affairs expert, and I have been invited by the think tank Tactics Institute for Security and Counterterrorism to give this video interview and answer a few questions. So the first question they've asked is about cross-border cooperation and intelligence sharing after Brexit. Well, let me start answering this question with a quote from former Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker, who said that a bunch of chickens looks like a combat formation compared to the foreign and security policy of the European Union. Obviously, cross-border intelligence sharing became more and more popular, to put it this way, with recent ever-growing deferred threats. So with hybrid and cyber warfare emerging, with different geopolitical factors coming into play, intelligence sharing, especially within the European Union and within the, let's put it this way, Western world, grew ever more. This is due to the fact that lone wolf attacks of all sorts, or determined by all forms of extremism, have grown ever more. Fake news propaganda of different means, whether it was anti-religious propaganda, anti-minority propaganda, has grown ever more. We can look at what has happened with both the US elections and Brexit, in terms of what kind of ads were being pushed forward, but also what has followed the terrorist attacks, the lone wolf attacks all over Europe a couple of years ago. So this obviously, I mean, those are obviously two different terms of promoting fake news and different forms of propaganda. However, their consequences are severe, both political and societal, as we have seen. And now, even though, I mean, for all of those policy experts watching right now, or all the other people who are interested in what's happening with Brexit, if you've had the chance to look at different documents regarding the policies that will be implemented after Brexit, you will notice that there's a lot of similarities between what was before. So essentially, not a lot of things will change, especially in the field of security and defense. And once again, the factors that drive this process to up the ante and not only continue with the intelligence sharing but also increase it are threats in the eastern neighborhood, are threats in the Middle East, are threats in Europe's south, and obviously from a NATO point of view perspective, because as we all know, the US has been looking inwards more and more, so there's no choice essentially. And I personally hope that common sense will prevail. Obviously, it's a question also of national security, and we have individual national member states, and a question of sovereignty. However, in order to reinforce that sovereignty, it's a bit of a paradox, but it's a necessary concept. To reinforce that sovereignty, you need to have more intelligence sharing, especially when it comes to cross-border threats. So, all in all, and in a nutshell, this not only will be, in my opinion, reinforced, but it will also increase in the near future. Brexit or without Brexit, and it needs to be increased now. Secondly, the second question that you've asked is about the European Public Prosecutor's Office as a potentially effective tool to fight cross-border crime. Now, surely yes and no. And like everything else that is new to the European Union, I say surely yes and no, simply because we don't know to which extent the European Public Prosecutor will have the powers to actually prosecute cases where we've seen some member states actually acting against some common principles of the rule of law, trying to protect various individuals or interest groups. So here comes the question, what powers will the EPPO have? So to which extent they will have the chance to look into detail what's happening with VAT fraud, for instance, or cross-border fraud. Obviously, in terms of cross-border crime, the powers will be fairly limited. However, the powers are there when it comes to the frauds against the EU budget and against VAT fraud or cross-border VAT fraud. So I am sure it will all. It's right now fairly experimental. Nobody knows exactly how this will function. It could be an effective tool, but it might also lead to, again, intergovernmentalism, or to put it more simply, individual member states not allowing the EPPO to prosecute, or not sharing. This boils down to the first question, again, not sharing intel with the European prosecutor. Now, the third question is a bit of a different one, and it regards regionalism and the current situation in 4 different countries. Now, all of them are fairly interlinked, but it's a bit different. So, what is the current situation between Moldova, Romania, Bulgaria and Hungary? I'll start with Bulgaria, because there's little to none emerging rise of regionalism to my best knowledge. So I don't think it will pose, actually, I see from a strictly security and defense point of view, Bulgaria is a fairly stable pillar with some exceptional spillovers towards the eastern neighborhood, and I right now don't have anything else to add on that matter. However, on the other 3 countries, so between Moldova, Romania and Hungary. Now, this is also a bit, this whole debate has a bit of a historical dimension as well. What we know is that there's a big Hungarian minority in Romania, and although there are no latent or potential civil conflicts at the moment, the whole situation is being used also for and due to historical motives by and during the political campaigns that take place in both countries. So whenever, it's literally a pattern that we can observe. Whenever there are elections in either Hungary or Romania, I would say the torch of nationalism is being flung around, and you see campaigns, nationalistic campaigns, targeting either one of the countries or the minorities in those 2 countries. There's a Romanian minority in Hungary as well, but it is, however, a lot smaller than the one that we have in Romania. So about that, on an economic and strictly militarily level, there's a lot of cooperation between the 2 countries. However, we see a lot of frictions every now and then, and those are used predominantly for political gains. With Moldova it's a bit different, because Moldova has been largely stripped off due to extensive propaganda over the years of its national identity. So the during their time in the Soviet Union, a new identity was kind of forcefully forged, and it became the new societal and collective thinking that the Moldovans had, which has now considerably changed, especially with the emerging pro-European youth. So there's a potential, I would say, red zone there, where all sorts of conflicts, including military ones, might be essentially, might start, right? So we have Transnistria, and I see that's the 4th question. We have strong Russian interests in the area, we have some Ukrainian interests in the area, and obviously we have, from a historical and well, ethnic point of view, obviously our strong Romanian interest in the area. Moldova is still largely divided between what the rural population wants and what the urban, so the dichotomy rural-urban, we have it in Moldova as well. The urban centers are largely, especially the ones that are heavily inhabited by Romanian Moldovans, are usually very pro-Western and pro-European, whereas some areas of the countryside remain fairly pro-Russian. So Moldova is still, I would say, a case that is on hold and will evolve in the near future. So I'd have a close look at Moldova in the following years. And finally, the last question is, how big an issue are the proliferating number of non-states for organized crime in the Black Sea region from Abhazia to Transnistria? So sadly, from as much of a believer in self-determination I am, from a strictly geopolitical point of view, most breakaway states and regions are usually used by key global powers and actually are formed with the support of key global powers to start or to use them as spawns for paramilitary activity. We've seen that in eastern Ukraine, we've seen that in Crimea, we've seen that in Transnistria, we see that in Abkhazia, and we will essentially see that almost everywhere as long as there's there are unresolved, especially ethnic tensions between two different or more groups. So unfortunately, this allows also key global actors to pose imminent threats in the vicinity and use those breakaway regions as hubs of regional and local military power. So in all honesty, I see those forms of breakaway states that exist, like I've said before, with the support of a major power, actually as hubs for fostering money laundering and all forms of organized criminality. With that being said, thank you very much for your time, and thank you for having me Tactics Institute, and I look forward to our next project. Thank you very much.